Welcome to the weather forecast on CIA TV channel. Dear friends, in today's forecast, we're going to talk about everything you need to know about the weather that will affect the United States over the next 7 days. Extreme weather will be rolling across the United States over the next few weeks, and this will lead to the potential for a record-breaking heat wave. In addition, significant severe weather will continue to be a possibility over the next 7 days, with strong winds, very large hail, and even tornadoes possible this weekend and early next week across the Great Plains, the Midwest, and back into the Ohio Valley. We'll start with what's happening across the country today. We've had some major storms over the past 24 hours, including a lot of storms last night in Kansas, Missouri, back into Illinois. These storms brought heavy rain, strong winds, even hail last night, along with some flooding. And then back near the Gulf Coast, here's Invest 93L, which is very close to becoming a tropical system. Right now, there's a moderate risk of heavy rain in parts of southwest Louisiana, including areas like Lake Charles. Back in the Northeast, we've had some showers and storms over the last 12 to 24 hours. Nothing too significant, and most of them are dissipating now. So the thing to definitely keep in mind here is that we're not out of tornado season yet, especially in the Midwest. This is really the time frame where we definitely see a higher risk of severe weather. And unfortunately, we think as we move into early next week, we're going to see more significant severe weather in the Midwest. We're going to continue to see storm systems moving into the Northwest and the Northern Plains, bringing severe weather to the Northern Plains, the Midwest, and the Central Plains for the next 5 to 6 days. But what's really interesting in the middle of next week is we're going to see a huge high-pressure system develop again in the Southern Plains. Now, we can definitely still see severe weather even underneath this high-pressure band. The thing is, we're going to see some really hot weather and even record-breaking temperatures as we move into mid to late July. So this is definitely going to be a pretty severe weather pattern because this high-pressure system is really going to last for 7 to 10 days across the Southern Plains, and maybe even longer than that. The only thing we've analyzed is that we're going to have some pretty severe heat as we move into next week. At least for now, below average temperatures will continue across the Northeast, Northern Plains, Midwest, and then slightly above average temperatures below our highest mountain ranges for the rest of this week and the weekend. Early next week, look for temperatures to start to rise here across the Great Plains on Monday. However, that won't even be the worst of it. Tuesday and Wednesday look to be very hot across the country, especially in the Central Plains and South, along the Mississippi River Valley, and then back into the Ohio Valley. We're expecting some very warm weather here as we enter the final week of July, and it's likely to continue through the rest of July, possibly even into early August. So get ready for some really warm weather, and we have a northwesterly wind flow in early August. We can almost certainly expect some very warm weather in the Great Plains and then anywhere near or just west of the Rocky Mountains. But again, this is a very long-range forecast, and there could certainly be some changes to the forecast, but at least for the next 10 days, we're talking about some really hot weather, particularly in the Great Plains, the Ohio Valley, and back into the Mississippi River Valley. And these are the high temperatures that are forecast day by day. This starts with high temperatures on Friday in the mid to upper 90s across the Central and Southern Plains. We'll hit 100 degrees on Sunday in Kansas, maybe even close to 110 in some places. This warm weather will really spike on Tuesday and Wednesday. Areas back in Nebraska could be in the low 110s, back near Omaha and also back near Kearney, Nebraska. By Thursday, the warm weather will really continue across the Central and Southern Plains, and there could even be some areas near St. Louis, for example, that could get close to 105 degrees by the end of the next work week. This warm weather could continue into late August, especially in the Southern Plains. I mean, places like Texas, we could easily have a long heat wave here, with temperatures in the hundreds. And it's been so humid here over the last few weeks that we've barely had a full summer in Texas so far. Temperatures will also be felt along the Mississippi River Valley. Most areas will probably be in the hundreds, maybe even around 110 north of Chicago, Indiana, and even as far south as well. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential for the next few days, starting today. We have a severe weather threat extending from northern New England all the way into Utah and Colorado, and then a small risk back into northern New England, where there will be a higher risk of tornadoes today, and then back into the northern plains, a low-level threat of strong winds and a little bit of hail. But overall, we're going to see widespread storms here, with a moderate risk of severe weather. While most of the storms won't be severe, there's still a chance for damaging winds, large hail, and even occasional lightning strikes. This is a damaging wind threat for today. That will be the main concern across the region. Large hail is a threat if you go back into Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. There is also a low chance of 1 or 2 tornadoes in northern New England, mostly northern Maine. It wouldn't be surprising if they added a 5% risk of minor tornadoes to the extreme northern Maine area today, because that would basically be the remnants of the storm system we had yesterday in the Midwest. Then on Friday, the severe weather threat will continue across the central plains and even back into the mid-Atlantic. However, I do have a little concern about Friday in southwestern Minnesota, South Dakota, and also northwestern Iowa. I think the risk of tornadoes will be higher tomorrow afternoon and evening, and maybe even some large hail. On Saturday, we have another severe weather threat from Montana back into the Ohio Valley. That includes Illinois and Indiana. This is another day that I'm a little concerned about, especially as we head back into the Midwest. At least the risk of large hail, damaging winds, and maybe even a few tornadoes is going to be elevated. I think the same thing is going to happen here in South Dakota and Nebraska, where we're going to have a low pressure system starting to move into the area, which could increase the vorticity and also the wind shear, which could also lead to a little bit of a higher risk of tornadoes. Now, let's take a day-by-day look at when severe weather will occur, starting today back into the Northeast. We'll be tracking a few storms producing damaging winds and a few tornadoes this afternoon, mostly from northern New York back into northern Vermont. The higher tornado threat will be in northern Maine, so be prepared for an isolated tornado or two. After sunset, most of these storms will move into Quebec and weaken. There's not much severe weather expected on Friday, but isolated damaging winds are likely back into Maryland, possibly at very low levels. Storms will also move through northern Virginia. Localized flooding is also possible across the Ohio Valley today. We're expecting a lot of scattered storms, mostly across the Ohio Valley, including Kentucky, southern Ohio, and southern Indiana, with damaging winds, some hail, maybe a brief tornado here and there. On Friday, we're expecting some more storms here across the Ohio Valley, but a little further south, not as widespread. These storms will come in suddenly, produce some isolated winds, and then there's also a chance for some occasional lightning. Back in the northern plains on Friday, we're expecting some large hail to develop west of Minneapolis in the afternoon, maybe even a band of thunderstorms in the evening, which could produce significant damaging winds, some hail, and maybe even a few tornadoes, so definitely be prepared for that. Back in southern Minnesota in the late afternoon and early evening, we could actually see a mesoscale convective system develop here across Minnesota and Iowa, and this could be a flow day if this does actually form. We're not saying we're going to have a direct show in this case, but we definitely want to keep a very close eye on it because it's going to impact populated areas across Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and could even reach Chicago overnight. There's also another scenario that could happen, which is a small cluster forming in southern Minnesota, and then we'll see a couple of isolated clusters back in southeastern South Dakota. Both scenarios are possible, but this environment is going to be more conducive to a few localized tornadoes, so we definitely want to keep an eye on that late Friday afternoon and early evening. And then back into the Midwest late Friday into Saturday. If that band does form, the remnants of that band will eventually push into Illinois and even towards St. Louis in the morning. The strong winds and low tornado risk will continue into the afternoon, even into the Ohio Valley. If you get back closer to Columbus, maybe even closer to the Cleveland area in the afternoon and early evening, it will eventually move toward areas like Maryland and Pennsylvania. And then back into the northern plains on Saturday, we expect some flare-ups in Wyoming, Montana, and even back into Colorado, where there will be a localized environment that is favorable for some large hail and even an isolated tornado or two in the late afternoon and early evening. I think on Sunday, we'll have a more localized environment where we could see a little bit of increased tornado risk, primarily in South Dakota and Nebraska. So we're monitoring that as well. And into early next week, the severe weather won't stop there. In fact, as we head into Sunday and Monday, we're expecting more storms to hit here across the northern and central plains and the Midwest, potentially at least a couple of major storms with bands of thunderstorms becoming more frequent as we head into early to mid next week, primarily in the northern plains and the Midwest. So that's going to be an area that we're going to really want to keep an eye on, because there's also going to be a lot of instability and quite a bit of wind shear in some localized environments that could increase the tornado risk a little bit. And then late next week and into the weekend, we're expecting that active weather pattern to continue across the Midwest and back into the Ohio Valley. And then finally into early August, we really don't know what's going to happen. We will continuously update the storm situation in the next news. Please subscribe to the channel to follow. Thank you for watching the news on CIA TV channel.